The Burtonsville of the Future, a farewell to former Planning Director Rollin Stanley, and why old houses make green buildings. All that and the latest news coming up next on Montgomery Plans. Thanks for watching Montgomery Plans. I'm Michael Brown. We're here to bring you up to date on important land use issues facing those who live and work in Montgomery County. On today's show, we'll look at how the community of Burtonsville could be transformed in the coming years. Next, we'll visit with Rollin Stanley for a final walking tour in one of his favorite spots in Montgomery County. And we'll learn why you should think twice before tearing down and building new. But first, let's go to the top news-making decisions of the Montgomery County Planning Board.
Welcome to Plans in the News. I'm Susan Kennedy. As Montgomery County housing costs continue to increase, the rental market is becoming more attractive to those who can't afford to buy a home or don't want to maintain one. Among their housing choices, accessory apartments built within homes or on single-family properties. This summer, planners are crafting new regulations for accessory apartments in hopes of providing more flexibility for families. Accessory apartments are not new to Montgomery County. They've been around for decades. However, as a spin-off of the zoning rewrite project, planners are proposing a zoning text amendment that would better define accessory apartments and how they are approved.
The issues became, I would say, a hot enough issue on both sides that we decided to pull it out and allow enough public input so that we could really have an informed way of coming up with our recommendations.
The proposed regulations would allow small attached accessory apartments to be approved without the time or expense required by the special exception process. Small apartments are considered up to 800 square feet. Large units could be as large as 1,200 square feet.
This provision puts a number in there, and that number is 3 persons max. That's whether it's a detached or attached accessory apartment, whether it's what we call a larger accessory apartment or a smaller one.
Recently, planners held 2 open forums for the public to learn more about the proposed regulations and provide input. More than 100 residents attended, and as Greg Russ tells us, one concern was at the top of the list.
One of the major being enforcement of the provisions, and we heard them loud and clear in terms of that. The Department of Housing and Community Affairs will work closely with us once a zoning text amendment is introduced by the County Council, if they decide to do so. And we will work with the whole idea of whether there needs to be additional staff in place to deal with enforcement issues, etc.
Planners will now take the comments they gathered from the community meetings back to the Planning Board before deciding whether or not to transmit the zoning text amendment to the County Council. What now stands as a vacant lot as you drive into downtown Bethesda will soon be home to 360 apartments and a grocery store. The project, which has been approved by the Planning Board, will be a gateway site to one of this county's most popular and populous communities. Located at 8300 Wisconsin Avenue, the property is adjacent to the National Institutes of Health. The lot has been vacant for several years after earlier plans for 200 condos failed with the onset of the recession. Interim Planning Director Rose Krasnow says this proposal will bring new life to this idle space.
What's really exciting, though, I think, is the grocery store, because the grocery store is going to be at the corner of Woodmont and Battery Lane, and it will really, you'll be able to come into the grocery store at the Woodmont level, and then you'll be able to go through the grocery store up to this public space where you can eat out. They'll have tables, and it should really be an activating use, and there's a lot of need for a grocery store in that area, so we're very excited that that's part of this plan.
The 9-story structure was approved with LEED certification, and it will also feature a public plaza, art, and a water feature. More than 12% of the units will be moderately priced, and plans call for a swimming pool and indoor community space.
We've always had an issue with public spaces for individual buildings sometimes appearing as private spaces. And we even had that concern here somewhat because, as I pointed out, it is somewhat interior to the two sides of this building. But we really think they worked hard, both in terms of the way it will work when you come in the grocery store and are encouraged to take your food outside. They'll have a lot of prepared food. As we get these urban grocery stores, they have more of that. And we had them kind of change their lobby on Wisconsin so it's curved and it's just shorter to kind of lead you along that curve into the space. And like I say, with the water element, I'm a big fan of water and public art, and I think that there will be a series of bridges. People will be able to walk on these bridges over water, and at the end facing NIH there's like a platform, almost like a viewing platform, where they can look out at the expanse. It should be great fun.
Krasnow says planners worked on making the project pedestrian friendly and that eventually there are plans to put in a bike share station. In the end, she says, the new concept for this strategic location is a win-win for the community. Planners expect developers to break ground in the spring of next year, with construction complete by 2015. I'm Susan Kennedy for Plans in the News.
Planners recently drafted a neighborhood plan for Burtonsville, which the Planning Board will consider in the coming months. When approved by the County Council, the plan could change the face of this crossroads that most people now see as a place they drive through on their way to somewhere else. Here's Valerie Burton with more.
Burtonsville got its start serving the farmers who worked the surrounding land, and today there are still signs of its agrarian roots. Take Seibel's restaurant, which began serving ice cream from this spot in 1939. Nowadays, Seibel's and the other businesses along 198 in Burtonsville work hard to counter the effects of a busy road geared to through traffic, not yet a place for most to stay. Kristen O'Connor is a planner assigned to Burtonsville.
This was a crossroads of 198 and 29, and so as a crossroads in a very vehicular-dominated area, you've got no pedestrian infrastructure, no sidewalks. There aren't any gathering spaces of note that you would want to sit down and have your ice cream or have your cup of coffee. It really is devoid of parks, trails to parks. It just has the roads and the pass-through traffic and the bypass that they're dealing with. They need more human scale connections to walk, to bike, to walk to a trail, to walk to a park. So it's those types of community places that Burtonsville really lacks.
Kristen says that the recently adopted plan will help set a new course. There are 3 distinct neighborhoods that will be addressed. The first is along Route 198.
This neighborhood is the Main Street MD 198 neighborhood. This has been called Restaurant Row with Chapala and Cuba de Air and Hickory Grill and Seibel's. And you also have automotive. You've got car repair, you've got the gun shops, the tire shops, you've got the convenience retail like 7-Eleven and gas stations.
Tell us what you recommended for this area.
As you can see, we are along a very busy 198 with traffic that's flowing east to west in a fairly fast motion. So what we're trying to do is slow the traffic down by allowing for 2 lanes with sidewalks and a bikeway and landscaping so that the cars will slow down, there will be people walking, and can't you imagine having a sidewalk with traffic that's slower, more respectful to the environment, and having your coffee or sitting here and eating your ice cream. So
Seibels has given that a try.
yeah, let me go show you.
Okay.
So here we are walking next to Seibels. We've got Maryland 198 behind us, and you can see the nice landscaping. It brings you into this outdoor eating area. We're here in the parking lot. This is the rear parking lot of Seibels, and what they've done is they've taken out parking to add this special space so people can come out and have outdoor eating.
What have other businesses along 198 been trying?
So other businesses have been taking advantage of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs program. It's a facade easement program, and they also have a retail signage easement program that they're providing funding to businesses so that they can enhance their outside appearances of their buildings.
So I've just learned a little bit about the Main Street neighborhood. Why don't you show me some of the other things that the plan recommends?
All right, let's go.
The second neighborhood is now filled with shopping centers. When Route 29 was relocated and upgraded to allow for faster commuting, there was a ripple effect in Burtonsville. Now that fewer cars travel Business 29, this shopping center is suffering. There are only a few stores operating amidst a sea of vacancies, with little incentive for new businesses to locate here.
Business 29, which is behind me, used to be the full 29, and so with the relocation of 29 to the rear of this property, they've lost their front door. Doesn't really facilitate any kind of economic atmosphere here, and so we're left with this old shopping center in disrepair.
What can we do?
So what the planning department has suggested is that we rezone this site from its C1 zoning to a CRT zone, which would allow for residential and commercial. And so on this site where we're standing, it would be residential above retail, and it would be a vibrant place. We would have connections to the commuter lot to the rear. We would have connections to the other large shopping center that's doing quite well right now, as well as Main Street. So Business 29 will be a place where connections will be made. We're really looking for this particular site to be the premier site for redevelopment.
Tell us a little bit more about the commuter center.
So the commuter center is directly behind the shopping center, and it was built after the shopping center was built. So the commuter lot came in, well-utilized commuter lot. People come in from Howard County, they come in from Laurel, they come here, and what they do is they park and get on a bus and leave. We'd like to reorient this shopping center to face the commuter lot so that folks would be able to come out of their car and grab that coffee instead of coming out of the car and sort of just running to the bus stop. We want them to stick around for a while and spend their money in Burtonsville.
To the north of the shopping center is a place that won't see a lot of change. That's where I met up with environmental planner Catherine Nelson. Catherine, why are we meeting out in this field?
Well, this is the edge of the commercial district and the beginning of the rural section of the plan.
We're in an environmentally sensitive area here. I understand it's the headwaters of the Patuxent River. How does the plan address that?
Well, most of the plan, in fact, is in the Patuxent River watershed, including the commercial district. But the plan in addressing protecting the watershed is that this rural area is to remain rural. So what we'd like to do is emphasize redevelopment in areas where there's already infrastructure, there's already impervious surfaces, and do the redevelopment there, and then correspondingly to protect these areas that don't have infrastructure and that are currently at a low intensity zoning.
So Catherine, what is this currently zoned and what are we recommending in the plan?
The current zone in this area is RC, or rural cluster, or you might think of it as a 5-acre lot area. We are recommending that the same zone continue, but we are also recommending an impervious limitation. Impervious surfaces are anything like parking lots, rooftops, driveways, and what they do is seal off the soil and prevent infiltration. And this is just the beginning of a cascading effect that affects water quality. Now, in the RC zone, throughout the county, we expect about a 5 or 6% impervious level. So what we're recommending, which is an 8% impervious limitation, is in keeping with what we find throughout the county.
So we're in an uplands area here. It seems
That's
to be
right.
a meadow. Tell us more about the stream valleys and how we're going to protect them.
Again, for water quality, it's very important that those stream valley buffers be forested. And we can see examples of that in the watershed on the other side of the road. Here, most of the area is in a meadow situation, and what we'd like to see is that at least in the stream valleys, that forests be planted.
The third neighborhood addressed by the plan is next to Burtonsville Elementary School. That's where active green spaces, places like parks and playgrounds, will be located. Kristen O'Connor says that this is something the community really wants.
Sure did. We were out in the community 25 times, either for meetings, events, open houses, and we really heard what people really wanted. And what they really wanted was they wanted fields or gathering spaces to just come and just play pickup games or even have field work. And then Parks Department said, we're in a deficit for parks. So they're looking at purchasing this property behind us to add more fields so that there's this synergy between the school, the fields, and then a public park field. This Civic Green will be a place where Burtonsville Day celebrations can actually come together. So we're really looking forward to the Civic Green feature being a very important part of the community.
So when all of this is put in place, what does it mean for the community of Burtonsville?
What it means, Valerie, is that we are going to have a complete community. It will have commercial, it will have residential, it will have neighborhood protections with the rural edge, it will have active recreation. It will be a crossroads that will turn into a community, and that's what the goal of the plan is.
In this episode of Around Town, we meet up with Rollin Stanley for some parting thoughts as he leaves Montgomery County for a planning position in Calgary, Canada. Rollin, we're here in Falklands Chase in Silver Spring for your exit interview, if you will, as planning director here in Montgomery County. Tell us why you chose Falklands Chase for this final interview.
That's a good question. This was one of the first big applications we dealt with when I got here just over 4 years, 3 months, 9 days ago. And it represents what can happen in the county and all the good things about it. So you're in an area with historic buildings, you know, pre-war garden walk-up apartments. This complex was very large at one time, parts of it have disappeared. And it was a balancing act, and why I say it's so important is it balanced the new and the existing in a way that we're going to get a lot more services out of the new development with grocery stores, etc., a new living style for people. But the key is we're preserving all this. Part of the agreement is to preserve the ravine we're in. You see the dog park behind us, the children's play area up there, and what I think is one of the nicest open spaces in Montgomery County. It's spectacular. So this was a win-win for everyone in the county, and it represents the kind of things that can happen when we all work together.
Rollin Stanley comes to us from the St. Louis Planning Department. He's here to tell us how he hopes to reinforce efforts to create great communities here in Montgomery County. Welcome, Rollin.
Thanks, Val. It's interesting to be here. It's been a month.
So when you arrived in Montgomery County just over 4 years ago, what was the biggest challenge that you faced as planning director?
Selling change. The challenge was to show people that the county was going to continue to grow regardless of what we did, and it would be best to make that growth happen in a way that enabled us to become more sustainable in so many ways, including fiscally. And making the point that we could not continue to grow the way we did. So one of the aspects is we have 49% of the county is ag land and parks. Preserving all those great things comes with implications. The implication is we're going to grow. We got to do it the right way, which means intensification in the right location. And that was the biggest challenge.
Yeah, it was a tough sell in the beginning. Montgomery County residents are used to things the way they're used to them. How were you able to get people to change their thoughts on how we should grow here?
Well, the turning point really was White Flint, where the property owners were able to do the kinds of things we couldn't do because they had a lot of money to put together to help show people what the development could do. And then the best example, and you've been there on your show, is where the Whole Foods store is located across the street from the townhouses. And whereas before the development occurred, people were saying, oh my goodness, that's going to be 65 feet tall. Now nobody really knows how tall the building is. They know there's a Whole Foods there. And so what we needed to do was get some good examples of what higher densities at the right place can do for existing residents in the adjacent communities. And it's not about the height of buildings, it's about what the buildings do for the folks who live there and are in the neighborhoods.
And how about trying to get folks out of their cars? How much of this focused on that?
You know, a lot of people think about smart growth and getting people out of cars. One thing that I've tried to learn myself here is that Montgomery County is built the way it is. People are always going to be in their cars. So the key is, can we make some of those trips shorter? Can we give people options? So again, in a case like Wheaton, by bringing more commercial uses and things there, perhaps more people could walk or drive a shorter distance. And one of the challenges in the county is we grew exactly the way the plans from the 1960s said we were, except we didn't connect everything with transit, etc. So our challenge now is to make that happen so that people have a choice.
A lot has happened here while you've been here. What would you say is your greatest achievement?
Going back to your previous question about the concept of selling change, I think we came a long way in working with a very progressive council about the need to think differently about how we're going to grow in the future. Two, selling the message of how diverse the county has become, ethnically, culturally, and economically, that in the minority population, we see a higher percentage growth in people under the age of 45, and showing the council the pieces of why those things are so important in the context of how we grow and how we look at land use. Because land use isn't about land use, it's about those things we've talked about before: culture, food, economy, health, education, etc. And I think we've been very successful at trying to, although we haven't got quite as far as I would like to go, of bringing a more holistic view of things. And that's been gratifying.
Only your mind works that fast.
Yeah.
I just want you to know.
I know, but you only gave me 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay.
What do you think is the biggest challenge that Montgomery County faces right now and in the next 20, 30 years?
Okay, that piece about diversity I just mentioned, the county has got to ensure that the new face of Montgomery County is integrated in all aspects of life. That includes at the elected levels, to the citizens outreach levels, education, everything. That's critical. The second thing, and this is a dialogue I'd really like to get going, the suburbs of America are going through or beginning to emerge into a period that kind of reflects some aspects of what happened in inner cities in the 1950s and 1960s. And that's when we see an outflux of certain groups and influx of others, and that requires dynamic changes. So for example, inner city America, all the wealthy people left, disinvestment. Now what's happening in places like you see the folks who are more middle income, lower income, recent college graduates, seniors on fixed incomes, cannot afford to live there. So they're coming into the inner ring suburbs like in Montgomery County, and they're finding lower cost housing like we see here, or doubling up, or finding alternatives, and that brings new challenges. And so the key for what Montgomery County and other suburbs have to do, what the cities did not do in those time periods, is find a way to make that a positive rather than a negative. So how do I mean by that? So if you're trying to attract your college graduates, you've got to find places for them to live. Do they have access to startup capital? Do they have access to jobs? What can we do to make them succeed in this environment? And the same thing with new immigrants. And that's absolutely critical for this county and so many others across the country.
You talk a lot about how you wanted to get people to change how they thought here, and you've brought a lot of change here. Is that something that you want people to remember you by?
Whether I do or not, that is in fact going to be obviously a moniker that will stick. And you know, when you're an agent of change in a place that's not used to change, it will stick, and you'll have your people who agree with what you did and the people who don't. So the key is, I think we've gone our 3 steps forward, so that even if we slip back 1 step, we've still made that change where I think we've crossed the tipping point where people understand that to keep our quality of life for the future, to maintain the ag reserve in our parks, to do all those things, that what we've been talking about the past 4 years is the only way we can achieve that.
Rollin, we are sad to see you go.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure getting to know you and learn so much about your vision for Montgomery County. And we have a gift for you as a departure gift.
I'm kidding.
Thank you.
Now that's hilarious. It's hairspray.
Because many a time we've been out doing these interviews and we've had hair dilemmas, and we think, you know, if you're going to be a superstar up in Calgary, you need your hairspray.
I need my hairspray.
You've got to do it. You've got to just bite the bullet and use hairspray, and there's your first can.
Well, thank you very much.
So please think of us each time you spray your hair and do something for television up in Calgary.
I will. Thank you very much.
And thanks for all your education about planning in Montgomery County. You've laid the hay down where the goats can get it so we can all understand it. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thanks.
One important way to go green is to reuse items we already have. It's more cost-effective, and it also keeps unwanted materials out of the landfill. That's why preserving a historic home can be good for the environment. Let's visit a family in Tacoma Park who decided to do just that. Katie Sebastian and her family are careful about the resources they use. Katie drives a Prius, ground cover replaces a traditional lawn, and rain barrels provide a source for watering. Buying a nearly 100-year-old home in Tacoma Park went right along with that philosophy.
An historic house has the value that it's already standing. There's really no way, even if you have a newly built, highly efficient house, that you haven't used more resources than going into a house that's already been standing for almost 100 years.
But simply retaining an old house doesn't mean it's energy efficient. That's why when the Sebastians decided to add this addition, they included solar panels on the new roof, which are already making a difference.
That supplies about 40% of our electricity use. We can monitor that through this panel, which tells us how much we're getting at the time, how much we have to date, and how many panels are working. If it's very sunny for days in a row and we're not using a lot of electricity, it will actually put it back on the grid. So it's tied into the Pepco grid. So we have a special box outside that records how much we are pulling in from the sun, and if we aren't using it, it'll go back on the grid so somebody else actually uses that or we use it later. So we get full credit for it, but it's not as if it ever goes wasted.
And never wasting an opportunity to conserve, the Sebastians recycled whatever they could and added sustainable features in their new addition.
This is where the addition was, and most of the features where we were able to reuse materials and or build in sustainable stuff is in here. So for example, this door was a regular open and shut door, and we converted it to a pocket door. These floors were the original floors. They took them all up and then were able to relay them in the parts that we still have hardwood. The bathroom, we used all sustainable materials. These countertops have stone and glass in them. The floors are also tiles that have been made from reconstituted tiles. The toilet we have two different types of low flow toilets. These accent tiles are locally made, and we incorporated them in here and also in the shower. In this room, we used sustainably harvested floors. I believe they're walnut. We also did things like reuse the doorknobs from different parts of the house. We have high efficiency windows. We have all LED lighting throughout the addition. The ceiling fan is a high efficiency ceiling fan. This is no VOC paint, and we use that throughout the house in the addition. The no VOC means that it doesn't emit any volatile organic compounds, which is much healthier for the people who are actually doing the painting and also the people who live in the house, because there's nothing emitted from the paint that is harmful to humans.
As you can see, the Sebastians tried to think of everything to make their historic home as sustainable as possible.
Well, I just think it's important from an environmental perspective to do whatever we can to decrease our footprint. And we try and do whatever we can to use less water than the average person would use, to use less electricity than the average person would use. And I think finding an old house and adjusting it as opposed to tearing it down and building a new one is really the only way to go in terms of your footprint.
Visit our website at montgomeryplanning.org for complete, up-to-date planning information in Montgomery County. There, you'll find ways to access the Planning Department's many services. You can check out our blogs, see what's going on, submit feedback, and follow us on Facebook. Well, that does it for this edition of Montgomery Plans. Join us again next time when we bring you more on the issues that affect quality of life in Montgomery County. I'm Michael Brown. Thanks for watching.